This is the SpectraLayers Pro 3 user interface. What you see here on the screen is the typical Waveform View display that audio editors everywhere are so accustomed to looking at and working with. In SpectraLayers Pro 3, we use the waveform display as a reference point for the work that we do in the spectral graph, which contains a significantly more detailed look at our audio content. In the waveform display, time is on the horizontal axis, while amplitude is displayed on the vertical axis. In the spectral display, time is displayed on the horizontal axis, the vertical axis displays the frequency spectrum, and amplitude is represented by the brightness of the material displayed in the spectral graph. Making selections on the spectral graph is easy using the 6 tools available on the left side of the user interface. Let's explore these tools and how they function in SpectraLayers Pro 3. The first tool provides us with 4 different methods for making selections in the spectral graph: rectangular, elliptical, time range, and frequency range. The rectangular selection tool allows us to make 4-sided selections in the spectral graph. Command D deselects selections in every case. The elliptical selection tool allows us to make curved selections. Again, Command D deselects. The time range selection tool gives us a user-defined time range that spans the entire frequency spectrum of your active layer. Finally, the frequency range selection tool allows you to make non-contiguous frequency band selections in the spectral graph. Each one of them covers the entire length of the audio content in your layer. The next tool provides ways to make 2 different types of selections in the spectral graph: Lasso Selection and Polygonal Lasso Selection. Here I'm using Shift Scroll and Scroll, Shift Scroll and Scroll, Shift and Scroll to zero in on details in the spectral graph. I can reduce my screen contrast control to make these details even more apparent. Using the Lasso Selection tool, I can draw a line around objects in the spectral graph. When I release the mouse button like this, the material is selected. Command D deselects. The Polygonal Lasso tool allows the user to draw straight line shapes around audio content like this. When I double-click to close the shape, the content within it is selected. Command D deselects the selection, and again I'm using my Scroll, Shift Scroll, Scroll, and Shift Scroll commands to restore my original view before moving on to the next tool. Next up, we have the Selection Brush tool. Before I demonstrate this tool, let's go over here to the Layers panel and change things up a little bit. Every layer can have its own custom color. We'll choose yellow for now, just for a change of pace before we go back to our exploration of the tools. Okay, up here in the toolbar is the place where we configure our tools to make them behave the way we need them to in the spectrum. In this brush tool demonstration, I'll choose a width of 1 second, and I will choose a height of 500 Hertz. Now, with the tool programmed this way, we can just click and drag across the spectrum and make selections anywhere we want. We can make non-contiguous selections anywhere in the spectral graph. Command D deselects, and we are now ready to go to our next tool. The Magic Wand tool intelligently seeks out areas for selection in the spectral graph. Let's go to the toolbar and grab the Zoom tool. The Zoom tool allows me to zoom in as close as I want for precision editing in the spectral graph. The Magic Wand tool can select non-contiguous shapes in the spectrum, which it identifies automatically. Alternatively, I can use the Subtract from Selection tool, which inverts the tool and allows me to deselect selected areas. Moving over here to the Layers panel, when I right-click on the layer, I can zoom all the way out. Shift and scroll brings me back to where we were when we started. The Frequency Selection tool tracks frequencies on the spectral graph. In this case, I'm just floating my mouse over the frequency. SpectraLayers Pro 3 is intelligently doing the rest. If I hold down the mouse button, I begin making a selection. It's really easy. Command D deselects the selection. Last but not least, we have the amazing Harmonics selection tool. Now, if you've been watching this video up until now, I'm sure you've been wondering just what the object in this spectral graph sounds like. So let's give it a listen.
People still coming to terms with the night of rioting which caused such devastation on their high street. And much of that street is in fact now a crime scene, about half a mile of it, as police officers continue their investigations.
It's a news broadcast, and you can see the siren as an undulating ribbon of light in the spectrum. And I'd like to remind you that the brightness of the sound is a function of its amplitude. Over here, the siren is very, very bright, and over on the other side, the siren is not so bright, which means, of course, that the siren is moving, and it is definitely moving away from you, while at the same time, the newscaster is stationary. His voice is bright over here, and it's just as bright over here. So we have the newscaster standing in one place, while the siren is moving away from the microphone. What we would like to do here is get control over this siren and bring the volume down a little bit so that the newscaster's voice becomes more intelligible. And we are going to accomplish this using the Harmonics Selection tool. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to adjust my view and my screen contrast control so that I can more clearly see the siren and its associated harmonic overtones series. In addition, I'm going to change the color back to the deeper one so that it's even easier to see the selection that I am about to make. Using the Harmonics Selection tool, I simply balance the cursor over the siren and draw the siren sound right down the line. As you can see, I'm picking up the siren's fundamental tone plus its associated harmonic overtones series. I'm also picking up some things in this sound that are not siren, but that shouldn't alarm us too much because we have ways to fix that in the next step. This is really easy to do. It's a lot of fun, and the Harmonics extraction tool is definitely one of the coolest things about SpectraLayers Pro 3. Now, with my selection made, the next step is to place it into its own layer. Easily done. Command C copies the selection. Down here at the bottom of the user interface, I have a new layer button, which I will click The new layer comes up here as the active layer. Command V pastes it in. It comes in color-coded on its own layer. Let's change that back to our old familiar yellow, which I really like. And now we have the siren trapped on its own layer, and we can get to work on it and perfect our selection. Note that before I said we had a few things in this sound that are not siren. Let's take care of those right now. Over here on the left, I will select my eraser tool. And with the eraser tool, I can simply trace along the edge of the siren and clean it up. It's really easy to do, and it's super effective. It does a great job. If I need more detail, I can have more detail. I can go up here to the new 3D displacement pad, which is a joystick-like control. If I move that control, I can see the siren in a 3D representation that allows me to go in and look at the actual ballistics of the sound in terms of its volume amplitude. It's almost as if you can see a volume amplitude envelope in the sound. I can still edit with my eraser tool even in 3D view, kind of chipping away and getting rid of anything that is not siren. And again, I can get down here to the sample accurate level, and it's extremely easy to get in there and do your detail work in the spectral graph. When I'm finished, I can go back to my regular view, continue working with the eraser tool until I'm satisfied. And like I said, it's a fun and engaging process, and it's also pretty easy and obvious what needs to be done. It doesn't take long to learn how to identify shapes in the spectral graph. Okay, now the next step is really important, but first of all, I'd like to remind you that we have two copies of the siren. We have a copy in the original layer, which is pristine and untouched. It's the same as it was when we started. And we have a copy of the siren here on its own layer. So we have two copies. The next step is to take our new layer, where the siren exists in isolation, and throw it out of phase with its counterpart sound on the original layer. And to do that, we simply hit the phase switch here, and we go from positive to negative. And now the siren sound on the extraction layer is 180 degrees out of phase with the sound in the original content layer. And that is indicated to us up here in the overview bar, where the out of phase material is represented by a dotted line. Let's listen to the result.
People still coming to terms with the night of rioting which caused such devastation on their high street, and much of that street is in fact now a crime scene, about half a mile of it, as police officers continue their investigations.
A-B comparison.
People still coming to terms with the night of rioting which caused such devastation on their high street, and much of that street is in fact now a crime scene, about half a mile of it, as police officers continue their investigations.
Okay, this siren sound is effectively eliminated from the mix. However, eliminating it completely may not be the best idea in this case, because for one thing, it takes away from the historical accuracy of the moment, and for another reason is because it takes away from the overall drama of the moment. So all we have to do is go back to our layer here, our new layer, and we have a gain slider here, and all we have to do is move that up a little bit and give it a couple of dB of boost, and then that siren is now back in play, but not as loud as it was at the beginning.
People still coming to terms with the night of rioting which caused such devastation on their high street, and much of that street is in fact now a crime scene, about half a mile of it, as police officers continue their investigations.
Okay, fantastic. We've gotten control over the siren sound, by using the excellent Harmonics extraction tool in SpectraLayers Pro 3. We've gone through a lot of material. I've taken you through the entire tools panel over here on the left, and we've looked at different ways you can configure your tools here on the configuration bar. The overview bar shows the status of different things. Here it's showing the out of phase status of our siren layer. The 3D displacement pad up here is excellent, and the 3D views of the audio content is spectacular. In the layers panel, you can see we have the gain fader to work with, we have color coding, and we have the all-important phase switch. There are many other features in SpectraLayers Pro 3, but if you know how to use the tools and copy and paste things into layers in the layers panel and use the phase switch, you are well on your way to becoming an expert in the area of SpectraLayers Pro 3